I think we're all well aware of what the objectives are. And so I'll go, actually tonight, I'll start with the weather. The tides are a bit of an issue for the forecast for the Seating National Weather Service Charleston. Forecast tonight's 9:25 p.m. high tide at 7.5, which could produce what we call level 2 flooding. Again, that's a City of Charleston emergency management term, level 1, 2, and 3. This would be in the level 2, which is flooding that disrupts motorist travel, stalls, and damages vehicles, and will likely result in more than a few road or partial lane closures. It also may create life-threatening situations, possibly requiring rescues. Now, level 2 is a broad term. It catches a lot of different aspects, and we know that we've been relatively dry lately, so hopefully that works in our favor. Thursdays and Fridays evening high tides are projected to be 7.3. These tides could produce level 3 or nuisance flooding. So level 1 is the highest level of alert for flooding for us. Nuisance flooding for motorists and or require a few road or partial lane closures. No significant rain is forecasted through early Saturday morning. On to COVID. Internationally, there have been 1,479,051 COVID-19 cases and 87,469 deaths as of 4:30 p.m. There have been 419,975 U.S. COVID-19 cases and 14,262 deaths as of 4:30. These are according to Johns Hopkins. South Carolina, according to DHEC, as of Wednesday afternoon, there were 2,552 cases statewide and 63 confirmed deaths attributed to COVID-19. In Charleston County, as of Wednesday afternoon, Charleston County had 308 confirmed COVID-19 cases and 1 death, according to DHEC. Berkeley County had 56 confirmed COVID-19 cases and 0 deaths as of Wednesday afternoon, according to DHEC. I've talked a little bit about the forecasting for COVID. A forecast team associated with the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation continues to project a peak of 14 COVID-19 related deaths per day in South Carolina. The team now projects that rate to extend over 6 days from April 22nd to the 27th. The projected date when the state will begin to average 0 deaths is now May 29th, assuming social distancing and other measures remain in place. This organization continues to estimate that the state will experience its peak hospital resources use on April 24th. Regarding keeping order in the city, City Police, Charleston Police Department responded to 2 calls for large gatherings or crowds in the last 24 hours. CPD is reporting that call volume remains stable with no reported spikes in calls for service, to include no uptick in domestic violence calls at this time. Charleston Fire Department was dispatched or responded to to 5 COVID-19 calls in the last 24 hours. CFD is reporting that the call volume remains stable as well, with no reported spikes in calls for service at this time. Livability and Tourism on Tuesday fielded 3 complaints that non-essential businesses were open but found all in compliance. The department proactively checked 10 other non-essential businesses and found all in compliance. It fielded 5 complaints about social distancing in outdoor places or in essential businesses. Finally, there were 13 code enforcement complaints for which follow-up is in progress. There are presently 8 apparatus collecting trash as they continue to work through West Ashley. All trash on the Ashley River side of Old Town Road from Savannah Highway to Orange Grove Road has been completed. Crews are currently working in the Sandhurst area. Charleston Police Department has issued most of its in-stock procedure mask to officers. N95 usage between police and fire departments has remained low, although there is an anticipated potential for PPE shortages in the near future. There are currently no issues with police or fire personnel lacking PPE during calls for service. A shipment of 22,000 surgical masks and 4,500 N95 masks is expected to arrive Friday. Additionally, with the arrival of a strategic national stockpile shipment today, the city has received a total of 3 shipments of personal protective equipment totaling 920 N95 masks, 2,900 surgical masks, 279 gowns, and 384 face shields. Employee work status with 1,345 employees accounted for and 15 and 15 departments reporting on Tuesday. 34% were in the office, 13% were working from home, 26 in the field, 20% on administrative leave, 4% on sick leave, 3% on annual leave. And the department's A teams are now on the rotation week. So we continue with that AB rotation. Calls to the Citizen Service Desk on Tuesday totaled just over 200 for the day. Calls pertain to residents asking if the city was instituting a 5 p.m. curfew. Calls also concern missed garbage collection and clarifying yard waste and bulk item pickup schedules. Pending your questions this evening, that's all I have.
Councilmember Griffin.
Yes, sir. Shannon, great update today. Can you repeat those 2 dates? Because those are specific interest to me and information that we need to be putting out, what DHEC's projections are on when they will have peak hospital use, and then when our state can reach the 0 death.
Yeah, no problem, sir. A forecast team associated with the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation continues to project a peak of 14 COVID-19 related deaths per day in South Carolina. The team now projects that the rate to extend over 6 days from April 22nd to 27th. The projected date when the state will begin to average 0 deaths is now May 29th, assuming social distancing and other measures remain in place.
May 29th, you said?
That's right. Yep.
Could I point out, though, that Councilmember Griffin and all council members, that that's a statewide average, if you will, projection. And my communications with the medical university and the modeling that they're doing indicate that Charleston may shift a little behind the rest of the state, thanks to our more effective social distancing. And so our dates may shift back behind the state average. Hopefully our numbers will be lower as well, based upon all the good work that y'all are doing, getting the word out, and that we're doing to keep people at home and at work, and thanks to the governor's order as well. But I just I think in the next week or so, that the medical university will be sharing more information about that.
And who is that institution that projected those numbers? Is that through DHEC or somebody the state has?
That's through DHEC. And I'm not saying it's unreliable information. It's reliable, but it's the state average, so to speak. Like Governor Cuomo is saying that hopefully right now New York is reaching their plateau or their peak. I hope that's the case, and they'll start going down. They're way ahead of us. You know, Columbia might be ahead of us. So it can differ even locally and regionally, is the only point I'd like to make.
Can you just share that hospital number one more time that you had? I missed that.
Yeah, the IHME, or the Institute of Health Metrics and Evaluation, is what we're referring to. It's continues to estimate that the state will experience its peak hospital resource use on April 24th.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Sack.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time. 2 of these questions I have are related to our current situation. One is Hampton Park. I know that I've had some calls from folks here in the neighborhood about closing the park. I know it's closed officially, but closing it to vehicular traffic. What's happening right now, and I'm one of them. I was out there last night. You know, folks are not in the park, so they're actually spilling out into Rutledge Ave. and that's potentially causing some safety issues with families. So no one's really in the park, but they're using the roundabout parkway to walk. But there is vehicular traffic, and folks are just spending their time on Rutledge Ave now as opposed to being in the park. I know Hampton Park is just one of many parks, but I was wondering if we had a chance to reconsider closing Hampton Park to vehicular traffic.
I see. Well, let me ask you a question. Are we not continuing to close it off the roadway, not the park, the roadway, 3 days a week? Are we continuing that practice? I think we are.
I believe it is
Yeah.
currently 3 days a week. But what's happening right now, Mayor, and I get that this is just one park of many, folks that live downtown, it's a more dense area. If you're out in Mount Pleasant, you're out in some of the rural areas, you have a chance to actually get out and walk. There's been several constituents of mine that have been by themselves, just either practicing yoga, hanging out in the park, and in our police force is doing what they're supposed to be doing, and they're being told to leave the park, and it's just one person. So I feel like, is there a way for us to enforce the group, distancing in large groups, but at the same time still respect that folks need to get out and exercise?
Well, it's certainly something that I think we should consider as we do a measured reopening, not just of our parks, but of our business community and everything. I'd like to put some thought into that because, we've been respectful of places like the Greenway bike path, for example, that as long as people are moving on through, they're using it as a transit purpose and not to congregate, that's okay. And likewise, in the Mary Murray Boulevard, if people are in that lane and are just in motion and not stopping and congregating, that's been fine, right? So my fear would be a couple things. One, that if you did that all the time, closed it every day rather than the 3 days that we always do it, that you're in effect welcoming people into the park more so, and that would lead to congregation. And you have the issues of, well, if it is perceived that you're opening one park and not the other parks, maybe that's not fair. But on top of all that, we only have so many police officers and we got 100 parks. So the moment we start opening our parks, the monitoring and enforcement of all that would really be a huge commitment. So my response would be, just off my gut, that I hear you loud and clear, that that's something we ought to move into first when we start opening things back up a little bit. But for the very immediate future, while we have such a focus on staying at home and work and distancing, I would refrain from giving opportunity for folks to be congregating, although I hear your point.
Mr. Mayor, this is Dudley Gregory.
Councilmember Gregory.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. And I don't want our park to be the only park in the city that does that, because I think what will happen is we will attract more people. Oh, Hampton Park is open, when it really isn't. So I really have a concern, given that Hampton Park is 203, and we do know that we have not concentrations, but we have a number of cases in the 203 zip code. So for me, I think that we would be working against ourselves if we did that. But I had a question for Shannon.
Yes.
Shannon, my question has to do with the public housing communities in particular, or the concentrations of lower income people. What's the extent of testing in those communities? And do those communities have pretty good access to testing?
Yeah, sir, I appreciate the question. It's actually been a major topic, a major effort for us since the very beginning of this to address folks that may be experiencing homelessness, along with, the broader community like you just identified. It's been a full court press with a number of folks within the city to address the needs of individuals that may have challenges with transportation across town. Someone who may not be able to quarantine in at home or even 180 place. And so we've had to make accommodations for those individuals. Miss Gianna, she's done a phenomenal job, her and Mr. Chris Jardin, along with the emergency management staff. As far as metrics that accompany those particular demographics, I have actually over the last 2 days reached out to our DHEC counterparts here in the area to express interest in learning more about what sorts of numbers we're tracking in terms of those specifics. So they're on notice that we have an interest in obtaining anything they can give us to kind of build an overall situation with our vulnerable population. I haven't received any specific numbers yet, but we're looking for them.
What's the extent of coordinating with the housing authority?
Specifically with the housing authority, I'd have to direct that question to Ms. Gianna. My direct interaction has been more with 180 Place, with DHEC, with Charleston County, and with our local businesses that are assisting with housing folks, kind of what I'll say like in the nick of time type situations. So nothing specific from my office to the housing authority, but I would have to lean on Gianna for that.
Yeah, Shannon, that gives me a bit of pause. Given the concentrations in our public housing communities, and particularly that population having pre-existing issues that might make them more vulnerable, I would hope that we're really monitoring those communities pretty closely.
Yes, sir. Well taken.
I'll interject, Councilmember Gregory, that I'll reach out to Don Cameron and make sure that they have disseminated information. I believe that they have. I just can't.
I'm sure they have.
I'm sure they have. They have closed their regular office up on Meeting Street. I got notice of that, but I'm confident that they had disseminated information out to folks that are living in public housing prior to that about, if they were symptomatic, if folks are symptomatic, how to proceed to get attention. But I'll double up with him. Yes, sir.
I appreciate that.
Councilmember Shade, and then back to Saccharin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is probably a question for Susan. How does our ordinance square with the governor's order dealing with his suggestion that folks not go to church this weekend? And our ordinance is a little more restrictive on church assemblage.
Mayor, do you want to answer that? Because I know we've talked about it. Otherwise, I'm happy to respond.
Well, I don't think they're that far apart. I mean, we recognized in our last city ordinance that the importance of ministering, and we had requests about churches even getting together to do their taping of their broadcast for a virtual ceremony, and we allowed that. So the governor's order, on the one hand, as we did, allows for ministering to occur, but specifically church services. But then at the same time, you've got to practice social distancing, keep 6 feet apart. And so his ultimate recommendation is that that they use virtual services, as we also encourage our pastors to do. So there's a little difference in the language, but the intent, I feel, is the same. Susan, do I have that pretty well right?
Absolutely correct, Mayor. And then just to add to that, the governor's order also emphasizes no gathering. So I think when you put all that piece it together, the message is certainly the same. And I know you have been talking to the clergy and others have too, and encouraging them to use remote services and not have any gatherings this Sunday or over the weekend, if at all possible.
Thanks for answering that, because I think there's a little confusion that some folks had seen the governor's order being a little more, they didn't use the word lax, but a little more accepting of gatherings than what we had in our ordinance. So that, I think that helps clarify for other folks. So thanks for the clarification.
Back to Saccharin and then Councilmember Jackson.
Councilmember Jackson, you can go ahead. I'll go after you.
Thank you. The question that Councilmember Shea just asked reminded me that I've been looking, or at least expecting that we're going to discuss, are we going to incorporate into our ordinance the latest stay-at-home ordinance from the governor, or do we have any intention of, trying to capture all of the similarities as well as the differences?
Well, we certainly, I thank Governor McMaster for his leadership. I think at this point, our two orders are so similar that there's very little difference. And we acknowledge that if there is a difference, if there's a conflict, that his order prevails. And so we could update our emergency ordinance one more time and formally acknowledge that, which we're happy to do, but to tell you the truth, we don't feel that it's necessary.
Okay, I just saw that as a couple of early questions by citizens, and I answered that there's, just like you did, there's very little distinctions between the two, and the governor's order would prevail. But since we did it the first time, I thought we probably were going to do it again, so I thought I'd ask.
Right. Susan, do you want to add anything to that answer?
Again, I thought we would not adopt it at this point in time, see what transpires over the next couple of days. If it's the will of council, we could do that, but they're very similar. There may be one or two grayer areas, and we are actually encouraging citizens and council members, same to you, that if people have questions about the order and how it applies to their business or their livelihood or their life, to just reach out to the legal department, and that will help them answer the question or give them the guidance of reaching out to the Commerce Department for a clarification on their situation.
Thanks. I just want to give one happy example of how that worked well, Ms. Herdina. We have a very popular florist out here on James Island in District 12, Tiger Lily, and they thought they were operating as an essential service, which they were. They weren't allowing retail customers to come in. They were taking orders and deliveries. And then they got the word that they were not in the governor's essential list in particular. This was before the stay-at-home order, I think. So they reached out to us as well as the state's Department of Commerce, and got an answer over this past weekend from the state Commerce that yes, they could continue to take orders and operate as a delivery service. But I think that's a shout out to the state. They answered on a Saturday or Sunday.
Right. And the governor's order specifically says that if a retailer is doing takeout or delivery, I think it's a consideration. And so I'm not saying it's a case-by-case basis, but if a business has any question whatsoever, you can go online to the Department of Commerce. It's right on the front page of their website, and fill out a simple little form. And their turnaround time is quite good to get back to the business.
Yeah.
And it clears the question, and we're 100%. If the state order and the Department of Commerce approve a business, it's A-OK with us.
Yeah, this was 24 hours, so it was all good. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Saccharin, back to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to clarify my question and comments. I realize that, closing Hampton Park would create inconsistencies with other parks. I get that. My main request was closing it to vehicular traffic. I think that's a unique component to the park that other parks don't have. And I just see a public safety issue that's brewing, particularly with folks coming out to the park. And I have one more question after that, which I had before, but I was interrupted, but go ahead.
No, you can proceed, Councilmember Saccharin.
Thank you. The other question I have is I realize we're in a financial time constraint with a lack of accommodations and hospitality tax, sales tax. Have we considered hazard pay for our police and firefighters? I know City of North Charleston has done that to some degree. I think they ended it, but did we ever consider that? And are we considering that now?
We did not, and at this point, we're looking at our revenue projections, as you just noted, the reduction in hospitality tax, in accommodations tax. There'll be an impact on business license tax. And so our revenue streams will be down appreciably for this year. So no, we did, hear what happened in North Charleston. Apparently for 2 pay periods, they had some extra pay for first responders. And I think they were thinking that this thing was going to be very short-lived maybe, and that it wasn't going to last too long. And it's not like a hurricane. We're finding out that you got just a short window of time that the storm either comes or doesn't. This may be with us for a few weeks, and then with the impact to our revenue side, it's just not a feasible thing. We're going to have to be looking at cutting corners here shortly. We're probably will schedule our ad hoc budget committee meeting at the end of next week. Notice will go out on that soon when we set a date on it, and we're going to have some serious budget discussions coming up.
And thanks. And my last question, which dovetails to this, is I just want to thank Mayor and Rick for scheduling a CD committee meeting next Tuesday or Monday.
Monday, I think it is.
To discuss the small business proposal that was literally 3 weeks. We proposed that 3 weeks ago. And the feeling around the table was that we're going to find some additional money, but here you're telling me that there is no money. We all knew that there was no additional money to find. Why was it moved to a CD committee meeting and it's been sitting there for almost 10 days as our small businesses bleed out?
Well, sir, we discussed this at the CD committee recently, and there was a rollout of great federal support of $350 billion, which is quite a bit more than what we could ever do here at the City of Charleston. Admittedly, you start a new program and it takes a little finagling to get going. They're already talking about adding another $250 billion to that pot of money. That would be a total of $600 billion that the federal government is putting forth to help small businesses. So I think we were legitimately and discussed this, that we were waiting to see how those programs went, while we also look for other funding sources in the city. Our regular revenue streams, yes, sir, will be impacted by what's going on, but there were other sources that we have been exploring. One was Economic Development Administration grant that was already in place with the LDC. We did get notice just yesterday or day before yesterday that we will be getting some additional CDBG funds I think the notice was we should get about $500,000 there. So this next bill to come to Congress would actually, we're lobbying, unlike the first CARES bill, did not include direct funding for cities less than 500,000 in population. So no city in South Carolina qualified. I've been on the phone today with Mayor Benjamin of Columbia and other mayors around the city that we're lobbying our congressional delegation to include cities that have less than 500,000 in population. So we're working to look for funding wherever we can, I can assure you.
And I'm not being this disrespectful, Mayor, and to any of the council members, but the whole point of the plan was a triage for not that the fact that the SBA was not going to come through, because there's no doubt that that money will get to our community. My personal experience, I've applied for several loans. I applied for a loan at Wells Fargo. They were out of money on Monday. They just announced today that they re-up, their cap's been opened up. So I'm going to go back to that from a personal standpoint, but I don't know anybody that has received any money except for the $10,000 advances. And the rollout has been discombobulated at best. Obviously, it just passed legislation, so I get that. You and I spoke, and I was going to give it the benefit of the doubt, but as a business owner, and I'm taking my councilman hat off for a second, I'm very concerned that I'm not going to have the money to keep my business open. Meanwhile, we had a plan in place, and I freely said that I don't need that money, and I would not take that money. But there are several business owners that I've heard from basically that are 1 or 2 weeks away. If we had proved that plan 3 weeks ago, these folks would have had relief next week, and it would have eased their pain. So it's never about the SBA not coming through. I think we all agreed that that SBA money was going to get here. My concern was it wasn't going to get here in the timely fashion that we needed it. And that's what's happening all over the place. Councilman Brady shared an email from a constituent and business owner he has, and they literally just opened up. So they're less than a year, so they don't qualify for this. This is the type of loan bridge program that we would have created that would have helped that business owner. That business owner is not going to qualify for any of the SBA funds because they haven't been open for a year. So the money was there, it was available, we could have used it, and we decided not to.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your request. I requested that Councilmember Mitchell schedule another meeting of the CD committee, which is the appropriate place for this to come back to. And that's exactly what I did. And we will meet on Monday to take it up again.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor.
Councilmember Griffin had his hand up a minute.
I've already spoke, Mr. Mayor. If Councilmember Mitchell wants to go.
Okay, Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we're going to have the meeting and we'll be discussing everything pertaining to the LDC money. And I think we need just to hold off on that until the Community Development Committee meets. And then we'll discuss that more furtherly and give everyone opportunity to voice their opinion on it. And I believe that's the place we need to take it up at, because we can't do anything here with it.
Thank you, sir. All right. Anyone else? Back to Councilmember Griffin.
I just want to make a couple of points. Number one, Councilmember Saccharin brought up a good question about the hazard pay, but I believe that we can actually get FEMA funding, some FEMA funding to pay officers as well. Can't we, Mr. Mayor? I think Charleston County has gotten some FEMA pay to help some of their officers. I don't think it's very much. I think it's maybe $250 a pay period or something like that. But I don't know if we've entertained that route, but maybe that's something that we look at as a city as well. And then to your point, Mr. Mayor, about this budget process and how tough it's going to be. You know, we plan a budget a year in advance and we expect certain funds to come through. And this year we're going to be, it's going to look drastically different because none of our projections are going to match based on just the downtime that we've had, and we still don't know when this is going to end. But I would just ask you, Mr. Mayor, to maybe think about this year and particularly maybe the budget committee be a committee of the whole for all of City Council this year.
Yes.
Because this year we can't afford to have any council members left in the dark. And I just think that if we were all at the table together, we can't afford to not have every council member at the table coming up with suggestions, because we need as many people possible to be rolling up their sleeves trying to come up with how we're going to continue to thrive as a city not just thrive, but this year and going into next year, survive. We are lucky that we've done a great job over the years to have reserves, but we're going to have to make some tough decisions, some decisions I don't even think anybody had to make in 08, 09. So, I would love for you to think about that for a few days, but I think that would be very beneficial for every council member to be on the budget committee, at least maybe not in future years, but this year specifically, because we're facing something that we've never faced before and we may never face again. We have nothing to lean on, no prior knowledge to kind of grasp at and look at as an example. I would feel more comfortable being at the table all the way through come time that we pass the budget in December. So I appreciate everybody. I'm thankful that we're having these meetings because it's been so beneficial and so helpful to get the information out. I have to just give credit to all our city staff and you, Mr. Mayor. You've been a great leader through all of this time. I've never seen you work as hard as you've worked these last few weeks. I've got to say thank you, sir, specifically to you. But if you could just think about that for a few days, I don't know what your thoughts are on it. I'd love to hear more what you think about it. But I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot. So I want to give you a few days to kind of think about that. Thank you.
I don't mind replying because the ad hoc budget committee is just an advisory committee, first of all, for everyone. The decisions are made at the Ways and Means Committee, which is the council as a whole, as you say. And so just like council members are welcome to attend any other committee meeting, we'll be sure to invite everybody. It's going to be just a Zoom meeting, so you can attend from wherever you are whenever we have that meeting. And everyone is welcome to attend. I'm the chairman. I'd be happy to recognize any council member who's in attendance when we have the ad hoc meeting. But again, it's just advisory. So all the decisions are made by us as a group, all 13 of us, when any budget change were to come to the Ways and Means Committee.
So y'all don't take any votes on the ad hoc committee about what to send forth to Ways and Means?
I'll be honest with you, it's more like a consensus process when points are made and we weren't taking official votes on things normally. It's just a matter of kind of reaching consensus about good ideas and direction. And I'm happy to include all of you to attend when we do have the ad hoc meeting and give us your opinions as we go, as we reach consensus on decisions that will then need to ultimately be approved by the Ways and Means Committee. Correct. All right. So I would like to call, I know it wasn't on the agenda, but the other day we had the discussion about remote meetings, particularly, and staff, Jacob Lindsay and Chip have been working on that very diligently. And I think they wanted to just briefly give you an update on what they've been thinking so far and how we intend to test this and roll it out. Is that going to be Chip or Jacob?
Mayor, I think I'm going to start and Jacob may weigh in at the end, and I'll be quick. Planning staff, really, Jacob has led the effort, but has been meeting at 1 p.m. on Zoom with legal staff, and Wes participated today to sort of discuss the process, get some more details out there. We wanted to get those to you as soon as possible, before they're, spoken to by anybody else. We don't want you to hear all this stuff secondhand. And there's really nothing controversial. We just wanted you to know what's going on because of this issue or how big an issue this is. The plan moving forward to prepare to go to these virtual hearings is by the end of this week, designated staff. We have a couple people from legal, a couple people from planning. Wes is going to help out, are going to research and recommend the proper platform. It may be Zoom. Wes attended today and had some great recommendations. We want to make that decision by the end of the week. Next week, we're going to test. It may be a platform or platforms internally and have some mock meetings to make sure everything's going smoothly. We can hear people, we can see people we need to see, we can recognize people when they need to be recognized. We want to do that early next week, late in the week. We're going to conduct a dry run with one of the boards. They won't be considering business, but we want the board members there. We want the ability to, for people to participate in it, to see how that goes and make sure, again, everything's running smoothly. I always say I've never been to a PowerPoint meeting where somebody's gotten PowerPoint to work immediately. And I think I went to one where the guy was teaching about PowerPoints and it still didn't work immediately. So technology is always tough. End of next week, by the end of next week, we expect to work out any of those issues. I did want to mention notices for public hearings. We plan to have all that stuff worked out by the end of next week. I think next Thursday would be the deadline to notice hearings for May 5th. And there's no set timeline. We want to make sure we have everything working before we start advertising, before we use a platform, so we don't have to switch platforms. Right now, I think we're looking at a best case scenario of the week of May 5th to start those public hearings. And we did want to mention that because I think we've talked about late April, but I don't think that's doable to make sure everything's functioning the way it should. And again, there's no timeline. If it's not working, we'll push it back a little bit further and we'll make sure no deadlines are not being met. I think the following week, we're going to try to do a dry run with each of the boards and commissioners to make sure they understand what's going on. They know how to operate the system. And, I think from Jacob's perspective, he put it more eloquently than I did, but, he wanted to emphasize planning staff's committed to having the right process in place before we start noticing or having these public hearings, because I know everybody's concerned about that. We're going to do everything we can between now and then. That's all I had. Jacob, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, if you're there.
Jacob?
He stood me up. I guess he knew I was going to do such a good job that he didn't worry. But if there's any questions, let us know anytime. We're going to meet every day at 1 virtually. It may change, but we're going to have a research meeting tomorrow and Friday at 9:30 to go over different platforms with Wes. And we'll keep you apprised as we go through the process.
Great. Okay, thank you. We just wanted to give that update.
Yes, sir.
I'm getting some feedback for some reason. If y'all hearing that? So, Councilmember Griffin, I did want to add that what I think would be reasonable before even going to the Ways and Means, like we do during our regular budget process, is to have a workshop, so we could spend a couple hours, whatever it takes, as a council of the whole to thoroughly review, what would be proposed. So believe you me, we'll engage council through the committee, through a workshop, through the Ways and Means Committee, and everyone will be able to have input. Councilmember Jackson, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. McQueenie. I was just wanted to jump off on that a little bit. I'm really glad that you're taking such a thorough time to test the platforms and all of that, but I do think the public should know that TRC is proceeding with holding their virtual meetings. They are going to do them by Zoom, and that link is made public on their TRC agenda. So I think that's something you have to get on the mailing list, is my understanding, but I'm pretty sure that we could publish the link. The first TRC meeting to be done like this starts at tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. I'm happy to send the agenda to any council member that might be interested to see it. But then the next agenda will be published tomorrow as well. Normally their pattern is to publish the notes from a morning meeting and the next week's agenda in the afternoon. So that will be going forward, probably more visibly, and the public won't be speaking at that meeting, but in terms of being able to see the plans or whatever is being discussed by TRC, they will actually be live on Zoom as far as I've been told by Scott Valentine and the TRC staff.
Okay, very good. Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree 100% on the need to get all of us on the same page regarding our financial situation. I just think that that's going to be a theme that unfortunately we're going to be dealing with, not for the next few weeks and months, but for the next several years. And the more we can all be on the same page about that, the better. So I look forward to participating in that workshop. And I think Councilmember Griffin's points are all right on target on this issue. My question has to do with our comprehensive plan update process. And I'm not sure if Jacob's on the call right now. He could perhaps provide us with an update today or maybe at our next meeting. But I just think that it's important as we're continuing to iron out the details of our virtual meeting process that we connect that with this ongoing comprehensive plan process, because as I mentioned the other day, this is such an important function for our city. This provides the basis for the sorts of land development reform and other reform that we're going to be hopefully implementing over the coming years. So we need the public more than ever involved in that process. And I just want to make sure that, we got a lot on our hands, but that's a big, important effort that's underway. And we've talked a lot about state mandates. Well, this comp plan update is a state mandate as well. And we got to do it, and we got to do it right. And I'm really looking forward to that process. And maybe we can get some more information on that at our next meeting.
Okay. Yeah, I know they're just having to adjust the public participation on that to try to put it more later and more on the back end, but I think we're reasonably proceeding even though we're under these conditions. Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to say ditto to what Councilman Griffin said about your leadership on this. It's been really, during this period, I've told you that individually, but I mean, it's just been outstanding. And the way that you described coming to a consensus during the budget process, during the ad hoc committee, I don't think I could have described it even any better, and anybody who had the pleasure of serving on it could have described it any better than the way you did. And it is not a tug and pull, believe me, it is a consensus effort. It's a really good consensus effort. So, inviting people to join in by Zoom, I think Councilwoman Jackson I don't think she's been on the actual committee, but she's been to probably more meetings than any other single member of that ad hoc committee. So, and she got to ask her questions just like the rest of us. And I think if we were joined by Zoom, as the mayor offered, all of us would be broadened and benefited, believe it or not, as to how the function of the monies that flows through the city of Charleston. So thank you for offering that, Mr. Mayor. One thing, and I know we still have to go through the hard part of revisiting, in particular, our expenses in light of the revenue projections that eventually our CFO will give us. We also need to begin to think when the economy, the term that's been used, snap back, what will be some of the things that we can do in that process to help citizens come back downtown, visitors come back downtown. Obviously, the CVB would be heavily involved with that. But what are some of the things that we can do as a city to help our local economy respond back? So, that's nothing to kick around today, but that'll be that's something that one of our responsibilities down the line too. And on the piece that Councilman Appel just made mention about the comprehensive plan, Councilwoman Del Chapo and Councilman Brady and myself served on an ad hoc committee to select a firm that would help with community gatherings, believe it or not, reach out to the community to have more public input on that process. So I know we all voted, but maybe I don't think we have actually I haven't heard the result of our vetting of the various applicants. I don't know whether Councilwoman Del Chapo or Councilman Brady has, but I know we're to have a meeting on that. But I know we're close to selecting a firm that will eventually help us reach out to get that public input. Obviously, Peninsula, beyond James Island, Johns Island, Daniel Island, the neck area, King and Hoy, and back around again. So that process is moving, and hopefully soon we'll have that company selected. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's right. And I'll ask Mr. Lindsay to give us an update on that at our next meeting. All right. Any further business questions? Councilmember Shade?
I'm good. Thank you.
So this is the Holy Week of Passover and Easter. It has been suggested to me that since we have a full regular council meeting next Tuesday, that we just forego any additional interim meetings, emergency meetings, unless something new comes along. Would y'all be okay with that? That we just, I think we'd only be suspending one or two meetings, and we'll just hold over until our big meeting, so to speak, on Tuesday.
That's fine with me.
Mr. Mayor.
Me too.
Yes, sir.
I'm fine with that, to not meet on Good Friday.
Yep.
It's the third day of Passover, Mr. Mayor, and it is Good Friday. And so I would strongly recommend if we could pass on Friday, let's do that. Let's give us just a little bit of a break. And I think you got committee meetings set up on Monday and regular full council meeting on Tuesday.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yep.
All right. So without objection, we'll proceed along those lines unless something big comes up in the meantime, in which case, of course, we'll let you know.
Amen.
Amen.
Mr. Mayor,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
Mayor.
Councilman Gregory.
Councilmember Gregory.
Yes. Yes, on the budget ad hoc committee,
Yes, sir.
even if the recommendation is not a consensus, because Carol and I offered a different budget, which was also considered by the body of the whole. In other words, what I'm saying is that even if there is a consensus, council members who are not a part of that committee can still put forth their recommendations with respect to budget. The budget.
That's correct. You might
Yeah,
say,
that's true.
you might say that we had a minority report.
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure that was clear,
In
okay?
addition to the consensus, we also had a minority report.
Yeah, what else is new, Mr. Mayor?
Y'all have a blessed week and weekend, and
Yes,
Do the same.
yes.
we'll see you all
You
soon.
do the same.
God bless.
Great deal.
Take care.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.